really is one thing, understanding that you live in earthquake country and that things are going to happen, earthquakes are going to happen. But it's having a emergency supplies kit, like with water and with food and medical, your prescriptions, and having some money because ATMs are not going to work after an earthquake.
Yes, we should always be prepared for an earthquake in California.
It's going to happen, for sure. And because it's going to happen, the idea is that we have to be prepared. The population needs to be educated. And we need to try and reduce the impact of the earthquake on infrastructure and the number of victims.
Preparing for the worst. Scientists are not throwing in the towel and will deploy all the technology at their disposal to protect residents as best they can. To do so, they will start by deploying one of the most sophisticated earthquake warning systems in the world.
The idea is that if you could detect an earthquake quickly enough, meaning once that earthquake reaches the surface of the earth, which sometimes then you take that information and you move it to a place where you can figure out, like, where is the earthquake located and how much is it going to shake.
The idea is therefore to capture seismic waves triggered by the earthquake using ultra-sensitive seismographs.
When the rupture spreads, it emits different types of waves. First, it emits so-called compressional waves, like sound waves, that travel very fast. These are also known as P waves.
They're traveling ridiculously fast, 5 miles a second, and they hit. And then a couple seconds later, the S waves, which are totally different. Instead of being compression waves, they're shear waves, and they're going to hit you.
And that's much stronger, and it moves a little bit more slowly. And so if we feel the shaking from that P wave, that actually gives you also a little bit of time to maybe protect yourself, because the much stronger shaking is still to come.
First, the P waves reach the surface of the Earth and spread extremely rapidly. A few seconds later, the S waves emerge, moving in such a way that they spread less fast than the first waves. It's this delay between the two wave trains that will allow scientists to develop a warning system.
The first compressional wave is the one the sensors will detect immediately. Even you, if you're in bed, you'll feel something. And if you're a seismologist, that's when you start counting. Because you know the propagation speed of the waves. And you wait to feel the second tremor before saying, okay, that's X many seconds, so X speed, so X distance. In the context of the big one, I think you'll be shaken pretty hard by the first wave, and you'll have better things to do than start counting.
Seismologists will capture the first waves, the P waves, in order to sound the alarm before the more devastating second wave train hits the city.
Think of earthquake early warning like a race, and we're trying to outrun the seismic waves. We're trying to get information out ahead of those waves that are moving through the earth.
This race against seismic waves comes down to the second. In order to win it, scientists have deployed more than 1,500 seismometers along the San Andreas Fault and the secondary faults. But that's not all.
That information is moved to the processing center. So essentially the brains of the operation are these processing centers. In fact, here in Pasadena, this is one of the processing centers right here where we're located. And it all happens in a matter of just a few seconds. And that's the important thing is that this is one of the key innovations. We've been using seismometers for years, but the ability to process that information super fast is the real innovation here.
Just a month ago, I got a warning on my watch, and it was a magnitude 5 earthquake just south of here. But I got the warning before the earthquake happened, and I was in a meeting, and we dropped, covered, and held on, and it worked. So when a much larger earthquake will happen, and it will happen, it's probably going to make a big difference.
It's the airbag analogy, right? You can't predict an accident 3 days ahead, but when it does happen, you're glad you have an airbag.
A warning, even just a few seconds before the waves hit, can save lives.
There have been some earthquakes recently where we've collected a lot of data from closed-circuit televisions. and you've understood like what people do when they feel shaking. And one of the major responses is people just freeze. They don't do anything. And so what we want people to do is not to freeze, but we want them to actually take that protective action, to do something about it, to protect themselves.
Preparing the population, anticipating, knowing what to expect. These are the challenges facing scientists. How fast will the waves spread? How long will residents have to protect themselves? Will the buildings hold up? To answer these questions, seismologists have simulated the most probable Big One scenarios in California's two most at-risk megacities. Up north, the Hayward Fault represents the greatest danger. Several million people live and work nearby. Major earthquakes occur every 150 to 220 years, and the last one dates back to 1868. At 0 seconds, the fault ruptures in the extreme southern part of the bay. The warning systems detect the first waves.
So the earthquake starts in the earth, reaches the surface in about 1 second. Information is moved from the sensor to the processing center in about 1 second. And then the processing center works on it, say, for about 3 seconds. And then it makes that information available to other people who then deliver alerts. That could take an additional 3 seconds.
7 seconds after the earthquake is detected, the warning goes out. But the earthquake has already wrought havoc at its epicenter, Fremont, a city of 220,000 people.
If you're close to the epicenter, there is what we call a blind zone, where the warning system isn't much use because the P waves and the S waves hit almost simultaneously.
One of the major factors is how far they're away from the epicenter. So distance matters. The idea is if you're farther away, then you'll have a little bit more time.
The P waves spread towards Oakland and Richmond. 5 seconds later, the more devastating S waves hit and caused the buildings to shake for more than 30 seconds.
The idea of the early warning system is to set a certain number of criteria based on the sensors in order to say something is happening that is abnormally strong. So we'll activate a certain number of security processes without even thinking. Typically, we'll shut down high-voltage electricity lines because we know that the wave train is coming, and we'll shake everything up, causing live wires to touch and cause a short circuit. We'll shut down gas supply. You can go through every red light. Everyone stops.
There are automated systems that shut down industrial manufacturing or open up fire station doors. There, even a second might make a big difference.
San Francisco is hit 26 seconds later, but the worst is yet to come.
It's often the secondary effects of earthquakes that cause the most victims. There are issues of water supply, issues of epidemics. There's a whole sequence of catastrophes that can happen. For example, very often, major earthquakes cause absolutely huge fires.
Fires are what destroyed San Francisco in 1906. To prepare for 400 potential fires starting, the city of San Francisco has buried more than 100 water tanks, marked on the ground, to which firefighters will be able to connect. In this scenario, scientists estimate that hundreds of people could die, more than 10,000 people could be injured, and 150,000 people could lose their homes. Another scenario, worse but also the most likely. Starting at the south end of the fault, its consequences are catastrophic. The earthquake is triggered around the Salton Sea. It is immediately detected by the warning system. The stopwatch starts.
So we did a scenario of the fault breaking all the way from the Salton Sea, all the way up to the northwest part of Los Angeles County. It's called a shakeout scenario, and it takes about 90 seconds for that rupture to move 300 kilometers. That's pretty fast.
Los Angeles marks the halfway point. The first waves hit at 35 seconds. But what will play against the city is its relief.
Los Angeles is built in a basin. It's essentially a big bowl. If you send waves in there, the waves hit, but that's not all. Unfortunately, they're reflected everywhere.
We're going to have waves spreading in the Los Angeles basin for several minutes, when they've already been and gone everywhere else. And so that creates waves that are bigger and last longer, long enough, unfortunately, to bring down buildings.
And what happens with seismic waves when they hit these basins is they slow down and they get bigger. That means that things shake a lot more. So if you think of some Jell-O and you hit it on the side with a knife or a spoon and the Jell-O jiggles, imagine downtown Los Angeles shaking on that bowl of Jell-O.
The waves bounce around the basin, creating another much more devastating phenomenon.
If you have a basin, you have a basin filled with sediment. And that means that you aren't on solid ground. You're on soil, on loose sediment, and that doesn't particularly enjoy being shaken.
When you shake the ground becomes liquid. It's kind of like when you're at the beach and you shake a stick in the sand. The water comes up and the ground softens. The same thing happens in sediment basins. It's quite spectacular to see how the seismic waves can liquefy the ground.
And that's a problem, because even if you constructed your building extremely well, if it ends up like this, it might not crumble, but it will fall down.
The city will be shaken for several long minutes before the earth calms down again. Is California ready for these earthquakes of unprecedented intensity in its ultra-industrialized cities?